Hello everyone, welcome back to another session of our Angular Bootcamp curriculum. So now we're going to go ahead and take another look through our material, but before we do that, just another quick round of intros. I'm Paul Spears.
You're Chris Harden.
Chris Harden.
Zachary Kipping.
Bill Odom.
Lance Finney.
Kyle Cordis.
Sorry guys, I panicked in the intros. Didn't know who to have next.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so we got a couple of branches that we're going to look at today. But before we do that, I want to take a look at this particular commit right here from Kyle. As I understand it, we're working on making the move to Angular 9, and we're trying to make sure that all of our curriculum is all buttoned down nice and tight, ready for that transition. And as part of that, we noticed something was not quite right with our template checking. So Kyle, tell us about that and how this affects it?
A while back, we had full template type checking working. But then something went wrong, and I don't know what that something was. I think at one point, wasn't there actually a problem with the Angular VS Code support? Something was kind of wonky.
Let me stop you for those watching at home.
Yeah.
What's the difference between full template type checking and whatever we get out of the box with like the Angular language service?
So by full template type, I mean only what you get if you turn on the setting that's named full template type check.
But what does that actually equate to in terms of?
Chris could talk about that.
Well, if the setting is not turned on, you randomly get some errors caught in your HTML files.
Like what kind of errors get caught?
Like if you're in the template, if you're referencing a property that doesn't actually exist on your class, or if you are accessing private properties of your class. The AOT compiler will seemingly randomly catch some of them, but apparently not most of them. If you turn it on, then it, in theory, catches all of them.
Yeah, this is actually documented because I found the setting just recently. It's full template type checking restricted. It's something in the Angular section of the tsconfig.
Angular compiler options.
And it's documented to default to false, but in the most recent versions of at least of the CLI or of Angular, I think it actually defaults to true now, even though the documentation still says it defaults to false.
So I'm running 8 dot something, and it was definitely defaulting to false because I turned it on, and I now have a year's worth of work fixing compilation errors. Because I didn't know. I assumed that the AOC compiler was catching all of the errors. Yeah. And I have hordes of developers. And I
went to turn it on in one of my projects when I found the setting, and it was already on. So I didn't know it existed, therefore I had not turned it on, but it was already defaulting to true in at least one of my recent projects. So
Zachary, on the project we're doing, do you know if this was turned on?
Yeah, that's one of the things I left, because we upgraded to 8.2 something. I had to go back to 7 for other reasons, but that was one of the main things I kept, because you can keep that across versions.
So Kyle, bring us back around now to this change here.
Okay, so at one point we were doing the full template type checking on everything that we taught with, and it's somewhere along the way we somehow lost that setting, which is interesting. You could be like CIing for a certain attribute of your code, then just like something changes and you're not CIing for it. Amazingly, after that, I don't know how many months it was, but only one of our examples was not full template type check clean. And so in the process of working on some work that's not merged yet, it's not in here yet, but the work is to make sure everything compiles cleanly on Angular CLI 9 with Ivy, right, which is going to land shortly. This is the only example that we teach with that did not already compile cleanly with Angular 9 and Ivy and full template type checking. And so I made a minimal set of changes, including a use of the any, to at least get it to compile cleanly, and figured that as that full template type gets adopted more, we'll probably have many conversations here about tightening up our
this is not the only piece of this change, though. This is the template change.
No, this is this view that this tool, like, you can either have it full screen or you can see the whole thing, but not both.
I want you to talk about the as const. That was the part that jumped out at me.
Were you not here for that whole?
Oh, did I miss that part?
Oh. So if you're watching at home, you really need to go back a few episodes where we talked about the discriminated union types.
Yes.
And that actually turned into a wild ride where we learned a whole lot of TypeScript.
Lance actually did reach out to me after that. He's like, you missed a really great conversation.
But you'll be able to watch it on the channel. Mm-hmm. So go back a few episodes.
I don't understand why it's necessary in line 18 but 19, not 19. why one of them needs a const assertion.
It's like Lance is reading my mind.
It's possible this was just part of a set of changes while trying to get it to work and may not have been necessary at the end.
Okay.
It is possible. Well, so the effect of that would be to avoid type widening.
But
And I'm not sure that avoiding type widening actually accomplishes anything here.
because the type
So-
for interface car is
yeah.
year, so we don't care if it gets widened.
So I would guess that
I would think. We
this
don't care.
change is actually irrelevant. It was just, I
Yeah,
was
I think this may
experimenting
have
with
been an
changes
accidental.
to make it compile clean.
Then I withdraw my question.
Yeah.
You don't want to. You don't want to know.
You don't
'Cause
want to know.
This whole
So
file, I
Pay
think,
no
was an
attention to
accident.
as const.
So I withdraw an objection and I withdraw the question and raise an objection to that line. Just
Yes.
trade it out.
It can be fixed in the future.
All right, Kyle.
Later.
Oh.
Okay.
Can we do side by side on this, because the intertwingling of the lines is hard to.
All right, which file was that though?
Oh.
That was pipes to TS, I think.
Yeah. If you
But
gotta
I
get it where
think
it's visible.
the far right button, isn't that going to be side by side? Yeah, and I think you had that in
Yeah,
the
you had
other
that
view.
in the big view too.
So many buttons. So this is not a very well typed pipe. I just made it a little bit less well typed with some any's to make it compile cleanly. But you really do need your pipes to be very well typed. This needs to be probably implemented as a generic, I would guess, to make it so that as you pass a type through this pipe, you don't lose that type on the way through.
So I'm going to take a guess and say that we're probably consuming this pipe in a way where we pass in more than one data type,
Yeah,
and then as a result, the string types
strings, numbers
are no good.
Yeah, and like until if you're not using full template type check, it doesn't matter because it doesn't get type checked and it merely has to work at runtime.
So this makes it less good on the axis, is that it, replaces a strong type with an any, but better on the other axis of, at least we're not
It executes.
failing
It
the
compiles without error.
template check. Okay.
So yeah, I think after we make the step to 9, and I think that is when it becomes more easy for us to once again have all of us readily have this available. Because you said you have it working fine in 8. There was some obstacle I hit getting full template type checking in 8, and I don't remember what it is.
Kinda
But
revert
no,
anyways, but
what we should try? We should try, if we want to just do something for fun, just pick up literally any place where we, where our templates need to be type checked, and make an error and see if we can whack VS Code right to make us see those type check errors in the IDE.
But we're going down that road.
Yeah.
Where are these changes right now? It looks like they were.
They're in.
Yeah, these are
so
in.
This change has actually happened, but that hasn't gotten all the way to the class materials yet.
These are all the way in
All right.
because literally we were shipping code that would not compile. If you made a fresh new Angular CLI9 project and dropped it in, it would not compile.
All right. But
Which
it
is a
sounds
thing
like
we
there's
do not want to
still
do.
some opportunities to go in and make this tighter.
And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's a 7.16, so it's so late that people
Yeah.
don't often get to it. But yeah, it is.
Oh,
there.
I
No.
talk about this actually fairly early in the class, because when I'm talking about pipes, somebody in the class, the most exuberant student is like, "Can I make one of my own of these?" And I jump ahead to this and usually talk through this.
So the
quite
answer
early
is
in the class.
you can, but in a world where you're going to use full template type check, which I don't know, Chris, what you're recommended? Should you use it or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're going to use it, which you should, you need to really up your TypeScript game if you're going to make your own pipe, because you need to type them correctly to do all the right things, which again probably involves a generic, and that's kind of an advanced thing. I didn't want to boil that ocean. I just wanted it to still work and compile cleanly, and so yeah, I think that we should probably revisit a whole bunch of stuff once we have stepped to 9. And just for anybody watching, we try to get ready for each new major version as it's coming up, but we usually don't actually adopt it in class until a week or two after it ships. Just because if we do, even though everything works and we totally could, it makes a lot of alarming NPM, what do they call those errors?
Warnings.
NPM warnings about what kind of warnings are they?
Usually you have these. Well,
Are they peer dependency?
the version number
Range?
is
Yeah.
slightly outside of the range that a lot of the
Yeah.
third-party dependencies are
Yeah.
expecting.
It's
They only
basi-
say,
yeah.
They're basically saying, "Hey, we've only tried this up through version 8, and now
Yeah.
you're on version 9 or whatever the
Yeah.
latest version is." And if you give folks a chance to to catch up.
Yeah.
And the experience in class is a little bit better.
So if we do that, the experience when they first type that npm or yarn install, they see scary words, and like some people are alarmed at those scary words. So we try to be a little bit patient.
So Kyle, what is the intersection between all of this effort to like clean up our templates? What does that have to do with Angular 9?
So
like, why is this a prereq to Angular 9?
It's not clear to me because you're saying that Angular 8 made full template type check default.
That's not been my experience.
Can we show people where the setting is that we're talking about? If we look in the tsconfig.json file, you should be able to see that setting somewhere. Usually in the Angular section.
I kind of wonder if we put it in here, if we might get these. If we might get full template type checking. See, at one point the template type checking
grab
was
some
broken.
Random CLI project. You should see it in there.
This is a legit one to grab.
Yeah, there is.
Right there. Angular compiler options, full template type check, true.
Try bringing that up into the one that we use in class, which is that one, I believe. This would be the one that takes effect while teaching. And what I simply there's no good answer to this question, by the way.
Somewhere right now, there's a very angry guy who created JSON.
Yeah.
Crockford is mad at us.
So what I wonder is whether we now have type checking. So like take that 365 and make that a string or something, and just see what happens.
Well, let's see. That wouldn't actually trigger anything because that's a legitimate.
If I take a string and subtract a number, shouldn't I get a?
But these errors showed up anyway. Like, so the problem I encountered, and part of why I even realized there was a problem, was that people submitted their PR, they had run the AOT build, which I thought was catching everything.
Yeah. No.
And then I happened to open their file in my editor, and it was red all over because there's like 5 properties that didn't actually exist. So the editor caught it, and I opened it in VS Code
is that because
and
of
in
Angular Language
WebStorm.
Service?
Yeah, because of Angular Language Service. So Angular Language Service caught it, and I could see it in VS Code, but the AOT compilation passed. So it wasn't unless I opened every single HTML file in the project myself, and apparently my developers, none of them had their editors configured properly, or they just ignore them. I don't know.
So there's some. At one point, the Angular language service had a problem. I think there was a whole major version of Angular where there was just a serious problem with Angular language service. I don't remember what version that was. Also, there could easily be version skew going on of some kind where you somehow inadvertently have like the wrong version of this to this. Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth, for what we teach here, making sure we get all our ducks in a row so that you get the correct support.
I also think this is part of that whole VS Code review and reconciliation thing.
Sure.
Because everybody here, other than probably me, has a fairly tricked out VS Code environment where it would probably make more sense to start with a base default VS Code, add just the recommended plugins, and know exactly what configuration.
Well, I mean, that extensions JSON, those are our recommended plugins.
That's exactly what I did on my project. I don't use VS Code, but the other developers do. So my project, I literally opened up the ABC, grabbed that file, installed VS Code fresh, installed recommended plugins, and then verified that the template errors did in fact show up. And I said, look, this is what you should be looking at. You should have red squigglies.
So related to all this, I got a small story to tell. So recently on my project, so we added Prettier to the curriculum. We all decided that, the opinionated approach, Prettier is worth some of the trade-offs of not liking some of his decisions.
Should we give a little bit of background for people who don't know us?
Sure, go for it.
Like, we're consultants, so some of us get to kind of work on our own machinery, but we mostly are like spread out helping all kinds of different customers with different things. So we're all seeing different like slices of practice out there at many companies in the world. So
which I think is fantastic.
Which is very cool,
especially for the training side of things, because we're kind of carrying with us these thousands of years of experience into the room every time we have one.
Indirect, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that actually was a great motivation for something like Prettier.
Yeah.
When you have in this room alone, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4. I can think of 6 projects going on in this room alone.
Yeah.
Where it's different teams, different opinions, different backgrounds, and Prettier comes in and says, yeah, you're gonna follow this opinionated approach because the whole point is to not have the argument about whether we're using tabs or spaces, whether it's whether or not we add a new line here, how we're going to deal with new lines. It's saying here is your approach. That way we can move on to talking about the actual business value of what you're going to deliver. So
Yeah.
we dropped that into the curriculum. That's been great.
Yeah.
I'm adding that to my project that I'm on at my team, and the challenge then has become how do you deal with Prettier and things like linters, and how do you get those things to intersect well inside VS Code? And so the challenge was that TSLint, while that is used for things like your best practices, it also has a set of rules for how to go about formatting the white space among all the other formatting things. And so whenever you plug in Prettier, it has a subset of what lint can do.
Yeah.
And then when you plug in TSLint plugins, it then fights Prettier for the ability to format your code.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so furthermore, initial versions of Prettier, the plugin didn't have a way for you to configure it from your editor to say, please just let lint do its job and you take the leftover parts. You had to like manually go into your settings and change it.
So do you want to see what we have in here that addresses that?
So what are we doing here? Because the point of my story is that I recently went back, revisited the Prettier documentation,
Right. You get up
and
to
they've
date.
recommended a new path that lets you actually
Yeah.
check something in.
I believe we're quite close to that recommended path. So
Okay.
it's right where we're at. Lines 8 and 13 are relevant. So we have the Prettier plugin and we have the lint plugin. So we have both relevant plugins.
Okay.
Okay. And then spin down there to the package JSON, our top level package JSON, yeah. Okay, and if you look through this, there you should see all the relevant pieces. So on line 33, you see we have TSLint. On line 34, we have the TSLint config for Prettier that makes them compatible. And then on line 29, we have Prettier.
Okay.
But by the way, we have a idiosyncratic use of dependencies and dev dependencies in here.
Yeah, don't use this as a
Yeah,
model
don't
for
use
your own
this. Yeah.
stuff.
We've had everyone sort of said, "Hey, can I copy and paste the package JSON?" And I'm like, "This is a strange package. This top level one is not suitable for anything but this." Okay, but we have all the relevant plugins. We have the 2 pieces, and then the third that helps them fit together. And then if you look at the TSLint JSON, which is somewhere on the left there.
Okay.
Then, okay, I think down at the bottom is where you find this stuff. Down at the bottom is where they get layered together. So we take the latest, so this extension mechanism says you can take something, you can like build a set of layers. So TSLint latest means that's like their alias for their latest recommended TSLint settings. And then we layer on top the TSLint config Prettier settings, which have the effect of knocking out a bunch of things from latest that would conflict.
Its primary job is to like turn things off in the linter, isn't it?
Yes, TSConfig Prettier is a TSLint config that turns things off. It turns off anything in TSLint that would interfere with Prettier. So you take the TSLint recommendations, you layer on the thing that turns off all the ones we config with Prettier, and then you layer on everything else in here, which are all of our stuff. So these are all our settings.
Yep.
The challenge is that, again, like you said, like a comprehensive review would be justified. I simply don't know because there's not, well, actually, someone should look. To my knowledge, there's not a switch. They'll let you ask TSLint what stuff in my config is moot because it's already the default. Because for all I know, half of the contents are here. Because if this is the file has been edited very little in the last year or two.
Right. Well, and I'm not sure how much effort is really warranted for this because TSLint is going away. I don't know how quickly it's going.
We're going to have to revamp it for ESLint.
So I can pick up the story here from where I left off. So this is all great. We're not all the way there yet here. So there's one key thing missing, and that is there's one more plugin that you can npm install that says allow TSLint to call through to Prettier and then compile those results back into your lint results.
Oh, that's cool.
And so when you do that, you can then have the TSLint plugin and the Prettier plugin in VS Code working together to then give you that comprehensive, well meshed out, each one doing their own thing, but reporting back to you through TSLint in your editor as well as in your CI/CD. You can run lint. You get both results.
So who in the room
In the
could we
cohesive
ask to
thing.
go like read that and make that happen in a branch for our curriculum?
Well, anyone that is in the development room.
How about this person right here?
Yeah, go for it.
It seems like it always ends up back to Zachary.
For the ESLint question, these exact combinations of rules plus plugins plus npm packages, you literally just replace them with ESLint. You got the ESLint equivalent.
I mean, I don't expect us to do that until the Angular team and the Angular CLI folks decide to make the switch from TSLint to ESLint.
Hasn't NX already done that? Made the leap?
They've started to make steps that
Okay.
direction, but they can't get all the way there yet.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm in no hurry
Yeah.
to do that. I just want us to make sure that we don't spend a lot of energy on something that's going to be obsolete when the switch does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was my notion. If I took out everything that's just like moot, it would reduce how many things we have to figure out how to migrate to future tools. But
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's
all of that
okay.
tying all that back together with all of this is, we were talking about how to get the editor to do the right thing with the type checking of the templates. And I just wanted to revisit where we were with our process for actually verifying that our code, that what we see here is actually by default what we're going to see when we run the actual tooling.
Well, you
and
could.
So now we know a path there.
You could go to that step, that example, and put it back the way I had it, the way it was before I made my edits, and see if we can make the exact full template type checking appear in our IDE.
I like that idea.
So you're saying if we go back and remove the...
Yeah, you can just roll back those specific files. You got to, with 716. So go into 716, and then you don't have to like copy and paste it from here.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the change that we're going to make. Is it this one here?
All these files. Just go to the 716 example, and then we'll just take all those files and we'll just roll them back to their state back a commit or something, and I don't know, and just see what happens. Do you have the capability? Do you have the right add-on in here to roll? See that show file history? I think you can just click that, and then there is so much on the screen.
3 days ago, it looks like.
So you want the one before 3 days ago.
So if you click on that one, maybe, right? And then go.
This is very exciting.
I gotta say, it's riveting video. I was
Well, there's
watching
something in here that you can
there.
click that will say, put my file back to that revision. Does anyone have any idea?
Is this
it
the
apply
opposite?
changes, maybe?
Yeah.
Unable to apply changes
that's
cleanly.
not what we wanted to do.
That's not great.
We just want to put it back to its state. I mean, in theory, if you click on one of these buttons, you should be able to say.
Okay,
put
before
this-
we even do that, what's going on here?
The question is, is it back to its previous state?
Well, I mean, we could find that out by looking at the simple little change that we had, which was
Or no, I mean, we can tell if we're in a
right there.
diff-
No, we are. This was the only line that changed, and this is what it is now changed to, because you removed these quotes.
Yeah.
And yet there's still something with the tool chain here saying that I don't know what those are.
And it's just super frustrating because I can only tell you that what's checked in is clean from the point of view of compiling under CLI 9 with Angular 9 with IB.
Oh, check this out. It pipes it through this field range pipe,
Mm-hmm.
which does not return a sufficient type information to tell us what C is.
That's what I was saying. To do this right,
Okay.
we have to go and like enhance that pipe to make it a templated type.
Yeah, so like we need to have this tell us exactly what the return value is of transform.
Yeah.
So if we add a type here of the T that you were describing, then we'd be in good shape.
Right. So
Gotcha.
that's the thing. The job is not done. It was just an incremental step forward to get past.
Well, that's really interesting. I like where this is headed. This is actually good, but I would still like to see what effect we've actually made by adding in the Angular compiler options to our lessons TS config.
Why? There's got to be an easy way to just get this code back
Well,
to
I mean,
what it
here,
was.
let me just add the quotes back.
Well, yeah, but how are you going to know you have it exactly back to where it was?
Because there are also changes over in the
Yeah, I mean, I had changes in 3 files, right? We have source
Right, but all
control.
we care about are that template is checked.
Yeah, there was a space in there somewhere.
It was a thing where I had to like
Oh,
make
yeah.
edits in corresponding places to get it to stop erroring.
Wait,
So you
have it right now.
you'd have to put it all back to how it was.
Let's see, so I'll just do this then.
I guess you can just, yeah, can't you just like go to a certain spot in the history using the other tool? Yeah. Oh, did you mean to discard the tsconfig?
Well, first step is to get back here,
Yeah,
right?
you can
Is this the
double-
one?
You can just double click on it to get back there. No, wait, stop.
Oh,
You
it's
don't need to
fine.
reset your current branch there, do you?
As long as I don't.
Yeah, you're just gonna
Oh, it
check
should be
out
fine.
then. Okay.
All right, so now from this branch though, we need.
Editing this is going to be hilarious.
Well, you can always make another branch.
I'm talking about your editing job of making this video make sense.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It's just like this is a sausage making, in the metaphorical sense, YouTube channel.
So it was a tsconfig file that you changed.
Top
here,
level
right?
tsconfig, and you changed it, not me. Oh, you mean the change I made in the inside the AOT sandbox?
It is now.
AOT sandbox. I don't see a tsconfig change. Does that happen here?
I don't know that it was a change.
I think it would be easier to go to the head of master and just revert those 3 files.
Here it was. This is when you reintroduced it.
He's there now.
All right, so now the net change here is.
So all we did was turn
all I
on.
did was turn that on.
Right, and let's just see what we can get out of the developer time experience. See if we can get it to find fault with our code.
But this isn't the one you care about.
Yeah, you only care about 716. That's the only one that had any trouble. Yeah. Ugh.
So when it's loading there, what is it loading?
You're waiting for the TypeScript tooling to initialize.
So it does not recognize 73 as being invalid.
And that was very weird. That's what I found also. When I was working on this, in my IDE, it was complaining about 75, but the build process was not complaining about 75, so I ignored it and moved on, right? The build process was failing because of 73, and I had to work with 73 until I got it to work. And so,
So Angular team, if you're watching at home, we'd love some input on this.
Oh, I think the answer is, like, we're not using their current stuff. If we want their current best, we need to use their current bests. So we have Angular 8-point-somethings tooling loaded right now.
But we have a consistent version across all the tools.
So,
for the time.
like I said, I don't remember the details. I don't want to cast aspersions, but there was a point where the Angular language server was working quite well. And then there was a version, or maybe more than one, of Angular where it just didn't get the attention it needed. And so there has been a time where we had a suboptimal developer experience with the language services in here. And I think a lot of that is looking bright and sunny again. So I hope to look at this once we have done the upgrade stuff. But as we're having this discussion, they're at v9 RC0.
Yeah,
Right.
RC0 just came out.
Yeah, so like it shouldn't be long.
What happens if you like take the quotes away from the year values there? I'm just curious to see if we tickle anything that causes it to get. No.
So now we are disagreeing with the pipe, because the pipe in this version expects those to be strings, I believe.
Does it?
Yes.
Yeah. And so this suggests to me that full template type checking is not being done because it complained about this. Like when I was running from the command line on v9, I could get it to complain that my invocation of the pipe didn't match the definition of the pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been fun and all.
Yeah, we should bail
let's
on
see.
this and get back on to.
So all of that was just unpacking your commit that you put in master and as to why it was put in there, how it affects us all moving forward as both instructors and developers. So
Yep.
at the end of the day, though, like that should just be a strictly fast forward step of progress.
Yeah.
And do we know that the settings in tsconfig.json are actually being fully processed and respected by the class machinery that runs inside the browser as opposed to the way it would normally be on disk? Because that's the other thing I wonder is like,
The JIT.
just because we turned it on in tsconfig.json in our materials, we do things weirdly because they're happening all in the browser.
So, weirdly is an unkind word.
I've been in it with nothing but love.
We use the JIT compiler, which is decreasingly of interest with each passing day, month, year. The JIT compiler does not do full template type checking or possibly any template type checking. The JIT compiler, yeah, like ours, you're not going to get a runtime error of any of this with the in-browser machinery.
Well,
Because the JIT compiler don't do that.
Runtime being in the browser,
Yes.
compilation happening
Right.
in the browser.
Right.
So the runtime of compiling the code, which in a normal environment using AOT especially, none of that's going to be happening in the browser in the first place.
Right. So, furthermore, even like ordinary TypeScript type errors in your TypeScript file don't show up.
Right.
Because the in-browser machinery they provided, like the stack we're using, System.js and a plugin and TypeScript and the Angular compiler, it's just not set up for that.
Quite literally one of my earliest whiny complaints about some of the stuff, the compromises that we had to make.
That it doesn't do the type checking.
That we couldn't get like all of the TypeScript power that we wanted from the stuff happening.
So we've been
in the
trying to
browser.
get it in the IDE instead, where it's more actionable anyway.
So this tsconfig.json file with the Angular compiler options, we're really only setting those so that the Angular language service, VS Code, etc., will be able to say
That's
in
the
the
hope.
IDE, you got a problem.
That's the goal.
Okay.
All right. So closing that chapter, let's move on now to Lance. You had a class last week.
This week even.
This week.
We're at
Wow.
32 minutes. Should we start another segment?
Yeah,
for
in fact, I'd like to take a short break. If we don't
All
mind.
right.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
then we'll see
We'll
everyone
see you
on
all
the next
back
video.
on the next segment.
Doobly-doo or whatever that word was.